new related industries in the Industry 4.0, and has also given a complete catapulting of things like AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning, and so on and so forth. So everybody knows all that. And the point I'm trying to make is that everything gets funneled through the telecommunication system. That is the important thing to understand. The second important thing is, in a country particularly like India, a lot of consumption, even in the B2B space, will take place via the mobile handset. So even in a B2B environment, a lot of people will be traveling out of their offices, and suddenly something comes up, and they can even stop the car and look at all very intimate details in their mobile phone. So the mobile interface becomes very, very critical. So OTA, over there, the last mile transmission, is important, even in the B2B environment. In the B2C environment, of course, needless to mention that most of Indians may not have a laptop or a desktop, and the mobile phone is the only connector via the telecommunications networks, whether it's in small towns or big towns, etc. In fact, a large consumption in the entertainment segment. I'll just take two quick examples before I throw the panel on. One is, what the pandemic has done is it has really impacted some industries more than others in both ways, positive and negative. For example, if you look at the entertainment industry, a lot of new OTT players have come in. A lot of consumption has taken place in the mobile interface. So in people's home, let's say there may be one television set, but there may be 3 mobile phones, and 3 people in the same family are watching different programs via the OTT platform. The movie halls have become a different, the offline and online mix has completely changed. It's become more 90% online, very little offline. I'm talking about the entertainment business. The other business very quickly which is impacted directly, is the education business. For example, there are many schools and colleges still not open. I know friends of mine whose sons and daughters have got admission in colleges in Delhi. They live in Delhi. The colleges are in Bombay, but they have still not gone to Bombay because the colleges want them to work from home, study from home, give exams from home. So these are little examples, So the whole thing has completely changed, and you are more than ever dependent on the telecommunication networks. And I'm, of course, extremely proud that having been part of this industry since 2001, and I, of course, know all of you very well. And I would like to now throw the open. All of you know each other so well, so there's no point in me trying to introduce people. But I would request that you say a quick, short word. Everybody knows you guys. It's like trying to introduce Amitabh Bachchan. It's not possible. So, but you can say a quick, short word about yourself, and then start with your opening comments. The questions are right in front of you. But what I would really like to focus is on the very first question see, ours is such a fundamental industry that you cannot work without the Indian government, without any government and with the government. So you have to be in tandem with the government on every single step, especially at the senior level, at the strategic level. So the Indian government's ambition to become a digitally connected India, we all know, because I'm in the industry, we all know that the 4G itself, we are not in 4G everywhere. Everybody knows that. I mean, there's no use saying that. And now we are looking at 5G, which should hit us in the next 18 months to 24 months. The 5G architecture is completely different from 4G. It's like the 3G, 4G migration was easier. It was 3 + 1 = 4. But the 5G, the basic technological architecture of the last mile is completely different. You'll use millimeter waves, you'll use passive MIMO, and etc. etc. So I would request Akhilji to please start with his opening comments and focus on how players like, mega players like Airtel and the others can impact the ambition of the Indian government to make India more digitally connected and work more in a virtualized environment. Over to you, Akhilji.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I think it's always lovely to meet old friends. This industry is, as was rightly pointed out, perhaps the most important industry in the world today, because whatever innovation, whatever is happening is actually absolutely useless without telecom networks. So telecom and telecom networks are something which instead of, generally deriding as something which is commodity. My feeling is there has to be an inherent sense of pride. So that's the first thing. Everybody associated with telecom industry has to be very proud, because what we are doing is something vital for the survival and progress of mankind today. So that is the first mindset change, where we feel that it's only the OTTs and the new age technical stuff and technology stuff which is what is creative. I think there's nothing more creative than having great telecom networks. Now, no question about it. Ultimately, broadband for everybody has got to be the goal. The digital communication policy provides that, but of course, many policies before that also provided it. Now, I'm sure as we discussed, we will have 3, 4, 5 suggestions for the government about 5G, the spectrum prices, etc., etc. But in my opening remark, I would only say that the first and foremost ingredient for telecom industry to be able to prepare itself to provide broadband to everybody has to be the financial health of the industry. Because it's absolutely useless to talk of philanthropy if you don't have money. And therefore, similarly in this industry, we have to talk about providing 5G and taking broadband to everybody's doorstep, or at least to everybody's device, if not the doorstep, because I believe that would happen only with wireless. The financial health of this industry, to my mind, has to be absolutely the top priority of the government and everybody concerned with it, including the regulator and DOT. And that is something I think we need to focus, because unfortunately, we are looking at other enablers and a lot of time is spent on that. But the first and foremost about restoring the health of this industry. Now, naturally, the question can be, who has stopped the industry from raising tariffs? Because that is the only way health can be restored. Unfortunately, for various reasons, that is not happening. And therefore, it's a good time for everybody to debate. And I would request my fellow panelists to debate whether is it the time for TRAI and the government to intervene and impose some floor tariffs so that the health of this vital industry can be restored. I would say that before we go into ROW and other things, we absolutely need to ensure that the health is good, so that there is money available, there are finances available. Because without those, anything which we may do on the policy front will not be of any use. Back to you.
Akhilji, thank you so much. You have actually taken words from my mouth. I was about to say that in the opening remarks, but good you mentioned it. I bring to fore the attention of the industry to 3 vital points related to what Akhilji just said. Number 1, the industry taxation of the telecommunication ecosystem is very, very high. You have to look at the taxation at all levels. You start with the spectrum usage, then your ARR, etc., etc. Everybody knows that. I don't have to get into this. Number 1 is taxation. I think we should work assiduously with the government of India to look at like a GST concept of taxation. Instead of taxing everything at every level and have a multiplier effect on your end, this thing. Number 1 is taxation. I don't need to go into detail. Number 2 is one of the woes which I've always discussed with people like Akhilji in my so many other forums. There is the constant battle between the hyperscalers and the telcos. And I'm sorry to say, over the 2001 and onwards, the telco owns the customer. The telco has the billing relationship with the customer. The telco has spent tons of money acquiring the customer. Telco has the first access to the data of the customer. But the guy who takes the lunch out of our lunchbox is the hyperscalers. So there has to be a balance between the hyperscalers and the telcos. Otherwise, we'll be at $2 per month situation. The third and the most important thing is, again, here the government comes in, that your payment of taxes, we don't want to give taxes and revenues to the government, has to be on a pay-as-you-go model. I earn the money, I give the tax. there should be no advance payment of like, let's say wherever they are, whether it's spectrum or this and that, the pay as you go model. If there are situations where the payment is difficult, the government has to understand it. So these are the three important things I thought I'd just like to point out, basis what Akhilji just said. I now request Mr. Ankit Agarwal, CEO, Connected Solution STL, to please give his opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you first for inviting me to this forum. Great to see everyone. Even in this lockdown, it's still great to catch up with everyone as frequently as possible. I think 3 or 4 topics which I'd like to touch on. One is definitely it's a critical time in terms of the sector and the importance of the telecom sector, especially in the country's growth and GDP. We have clearly taken a target of 5 trillion as an economy by 2025. And by far, I think the largest impact of making that and enabling that happen will be the telecom sector, and especially as we move from 4G to 5G. One of the most important things we're clearly seeing is that while 4G was largely used for better data speeds, and that still has to improve, 5G will clearly be a very heavy enterprise application where you will be looking at very strong networks, low latency networks to enable machine to machine and manufacturing sectors and other sectors in particular. So I think if we can enable that to happen in an efficient way, in a cost efficient way and time efficient way, that I think can significantly enable Indian manufacturing and take it towards Industry 4.0. So that's something that I think very closely the government should look at, because at one point we're looking at ease of doing business and enabling manufacturing and exports from India. I think clearly 5G can be a strong enabler to make that happen. I think linked to how to make that happen clearly is where government has to look at all the elements of costs and how to make the industry viable. I think that's absolutely critical because essentially I think what the underlying theme clearly is coming out is so much of the industry investments are going into paying for spectrum and taxes and all of those elements, that there's just very limited left for investment into the networks itself, whether it's wireless or wireline. And we continuously see that, especially on the wireline side, on the optic fiber, India is significantly underinvesting the rest of the world. And just one example I can share and probably close on that is that just in the optic fiber space, every year, India is investing 1/12 of what China is doing in terms of optic fiber. So we're broadly investing 20 to 25 million fiber kilometers every year, while China is putting between 250 to 300 million fiber kilometers every year. So that's a massive, shortage in the quality of a network that ultimately relates to then a speed of 4G and then ultimately the 5G networks. And also the fiber to the home that a large portion of our operators want to deploy. This, of course, will enable significant amount of converged networks with the government enabling this. And I'm sure we'll touch on right away and other elements which the government should enable and should help the government and industry work together to make this right away and other issues happen. So this is in essence what we see. We clearly see 4G and 5G can become critical enablers, 5G in particular on the enterprise side. We believe that the operators need to have the freedom to invest in their networks many-fold compared to what's happening today. And in particular in fiber, we see that a multi-fold investment is required over the next 5 to 10 years to enable the quality of networks that our country needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ankit. I think you touched on two very raw nerves of the industry, and very rightly so. Number one is that the industry, the government should look at the entire telecommunication industry as an input cost. It's like when you manufacture a bridge, when you build a bridge, you see the cost of steel. If the cost of steel itself is very high, obviously the cost of the bridge will be higher and you will be uncompetitive in a global scenario.
Yes.
The telecommunication industry should be looked at as an input cost, as an enabler, especially with 5G coming in, which huge costs, capex costs. And so the enterprise, ultimate valuation of the enterprise of their end products are lesser. But if your input cost itself is high, so naturally you will be uncompetitive in the world.
Yep.
The second important thing you touched on is the wireline infrastructure, which obviously is woefully low in this. One is that if you look at certain, there are various organizations, government organizations, which have large optical fibers, which are completely unused. Example is Railtel and so on.
Yes.
So how can there should be a complete, like a fiber board or something, government fiber board or something, where the usage or whatever we have, we are underpenetrated, that is known, but whatever we have, we should have interconnection so that we could use each other's services. So even they have a better return on investment. And I think comments are extremely important, because without the telecommunication network has to be has to have, of course, the fixed line, the broadband. The other, of course, is the wireless, and both of them go hand in hand to actually service both the B2B and the B2C customer. So I will now request Mr. Saurabh Sahu, Managing Director and Client Lead in Communication, Media and Technology of Accenture, to give his opening comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sukanta. And again, very happy to be here amongst the stalwarts of the industry. Belonging to the consulting field, I have the advantage of being in the know-how of the industry, but being away from it, and therefore having a little more bird's eye view. I head and run Accenture's consulting for telecom and media businesses. And in my past avatar, have been leading Accenture's analytics and digital functions as well. So therefore, the best of both the worlds in some sense. I think clearly to the points which Mr. Akhil Gupta, Ankit have made, I concur and resonate with those. Very clearly, there is a need for an accelerated involvement of the government in terms of making telecom clearly a prized industry for India in the top echelons of our priorities. Taking a bit of a slightly, I would say, offline view of this to look at it. Very clearly, the industry has come through some really severe challenges, right? And we are slowly trying to overcome them. But at the end of the day, I think growth and innovation are clearly the two mantras that the industry will have to follow if we really have to bring out the best in terms of the capabilities here. So I would like to just briefly touch upon in my opening remarks around what I call as the 3 T's: trust, technology, and transformation. Right? If I look at trust, a recent survey that Accenture did for customers connectivity in terms of connectivity services, not only in India but also globally, clearly has come out that more than 80% of the customers have posed their faith in telecom service providers as the first port of preference for anything related to connectivity. So for one-stop connectivity services against their DTH providers or against their scalers or against any of the others, I think the communication service providers have been clearly voted as the firm or the entity where customers have the trust to be connectivity provider for their phones. That's a very, very big show of faith, which I think even the government should take notice and therefore give the right impetus to the telecom industry to flourish. The second part is around technology. Again, I mean, I will only be preaching to the choir if I talk about the transformation that will be required from 4G to 5G. But I think very clearly for this, for a country like India to happen, have the technology reaching the right devices in the right language with the right connectivity. It will be the key enablers in terms of making this technology accessible and literally making telecom, whether it is broadband or wireless, as an essential service for the country. And that's where the government can play a significant role in terms of public-private partnerships, looking at an ecosystem of players that can make this particular thing happen. The last T, or the third T, is in terms of transformation. And this is where I think the telecom companies and, kudos to Mr. Gupta, Mr. Akhil Gupta has come, premises in terms of what Bharti Airtel is already doing. Likewise, what very clearly is the kind of use cases or the experience that we can provide to the customers in terms of transformation. At the end of the day, the revenues, the tariffs are all linked to the kind of customer experience you can provide to the customers. If the use, especially with the advent of 5G, and when I say customers here, I'm talking about both enterprises, which Ankit talked about, the enterprises as well as the end customers, in terms of the kind of experiences and the use cases that the telecom industry can actually facilitate with this area. I think I would add a fourth T now, which is taxation. Mr. Sukanta, from your opening remarks as well, which will be the fourth T, where I think clearly the government and the firms can work together much better to make it, if not fully, but at least alleviate the pain to a large extent for the telecom companies to flourish. I think with these thoughts in mind, if we're able to bring it together, clearly India is a country which can make a cradle of 5G, where I believe that we have a great opportunity here, more than the challenges now. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Saurabh. I would now request Mr. Balaji, Chief Regulatory and Corporate Affairs Officer of Vodafone Idea Limited, to say his opening remarks. And who better than Mr. Balaji to talk about on the policy front, particularly at least the 3 to 5 interventions which can help the country achieve the Digital India dream, and what the government's role should be in that intervention. Over to you, Mr. Balaji.
Thank you so much, Sukanta. I think you've set the context so beautifully as the moderator, and I think Akhil Bhai and Saurabh and Ankit have already kind of talked a lot about the challenges that are here. I guess just looking back in the last 1 year, because that sets the context quite well, the network warriors of all the operators, whether it's Vodafone Idea, whether it's Airtel, whether it's Jio or BSNL for that matter, have really done a stupendous job. If I just take the example of Vodafone Idea, in a week we saw the traffic go up what had gone up a year before in a whole year, right? That's the kind of traffic change that happened when lockdown hit us. And also the traffic patterns change dramatically from office environment to home environment. The fact that operators were agile, the fact that partnerships in place, equipment providers, the tower partnership, that I think that's one part that I wanted to kind of definitely say, that the industry has proven it's that it hasn't, it still has the agility that we started off 25 years ago with a lot of hope and a lot of aspiration, and now we've actually demonstrated that in a time of crisis for India as a country. Number two, I would definitely want to highlight the fact that the transformation journey is something that each of the operators have done their own thing. If I look at Vodafone Idea as an example, and we could manage the world's largest network integration in a matter of 2 years. We concluded at the time of the pandemic, we were actually able to do a whole new brand launch during the pandemic. I think that just shows the ability of the operator community to kind of do a lot of work, no matter how stressful the environment is. And so I think the innovation quotient is high up there for the operator community and the telecom sector as a whole. I'm just saying, period. It's not just one element, but the entire ecosystem actually makes this happen. The third thing is looking ahead. I think each of us as operators have focused so much on cloudification of the core, network virtualization. When the government has made a call around, certain aspects of keeping networks secure, we've done our bit. We are actively pushing open radio networks, open RAN as it's called, again with the intent of creating innovation in deployments, ensuring that we can continue to keep the costs of network as low as possible. I think that's really where a movement towards an open RAN takes place. I'm sure Vikram will talk, will appreciate that, because there's so much that the IT networks have done, IT systems have done to basically standardize things. And that's what we are looking at, open RAN, using hardware that's readily available. And then on top of that, getting the innovation of software, which India, innovate. And therefore, so everything that's possible to in the future is being. That said, I think the NDCP is a great document. The government has taken a lot of inputs from industry. They put great brains in the government to work, and announcement on NDCP, the digital communication policy was done. And I think they said $100 billion of investments required. And we 100% agree that that is the kind of number that's required to make a 1 trillion economy, which is 20% of a 5 trillion Indian economy. Numbers are right. Therefore, it is health and the ability to put more money in the hands of the operators to spend on some of these initiatives, and also for other ecosystem players to invest in the sector is super, super critical. The fact that we today have 60 times data and 3 times voice that percolated through the networks 5 years ago is a testimony to what we've done. But the fact is the revenue streams of the industry is lower now than it was 5 years ago. If ARPUs are at 150 rupees, then that's not where it ought to be. And I think there's a agreement with all the operators. And in fact, kudos to all the operators for signaling that there needs to be something done on the pricing. And that request has been made to the regulator. The request has been made to the operator. It's a combination of pricing. It's a combination of regulatory levies that the NDCP talks about reducing in order to put more money in the hands of the operators to invest more into future, to buy more spectrum in the future, are all out there. We just hope that in the conversation of collaboration that Sukanta rightly talked about, that between the government and the operators, the other ecosystem players, we are able to educate why it is required. I think this government is bold. In the case of aviation, they have gone ahead and put a floor pricing in place for a certain temporary period of time. I'm sure it will be removed when the situation is no longer warranted. Because all the operators are talking about a floor pricing, perhaps the time has come for it to be looked at seriously, and a right model is found, so that for a temporary period of time, till the investments are complete, the industry is whole again, and the entire journey of 2G to 4G is complete, and then to 5G investments are made, that matter is handled quite well. And therefore, within that, whether it's spectrum pricing, availability of adequate spectrum, backhaul spectrum like ENV being made available, to the operators, are all elements of the whole piece. And the last piece, which I know there's no better person than Akhil to talk about it, but it's about fiberization of towers. We have 30-35% of the towers fiberized. If you want 5G, it's very important to get to 85-90%. Any way that can be shared, any way that the USO funds, for example, are funnelized for suburban and rural towers to be connected first and foremost. So while panchayats have been done, which is fantastic, it's time that you get the towers fiberized in urban and suburban areas, rural and suburban areas using USO fund. And the urban thing, if there is partnership with the local administration and they don't go around only looking for more and more rentals in order to lay fiber, I think that problem can be solved easily. Over to you, Sukanta.
Thank you so much, Mr. Balaji. I think you have touched on some very, very important aspects of the network. I would really like to again emphasize that being a marketing man, I was very impressed by not only because it's my ex-company, very impressed with the complete virtual brand launch, the global brand launch of VI, where you got two of the world's biggest brands into one fold, and it was completely done virtually in the days of the pandemic. The other important thing which you mentioned, which I should mention as going forward, is the Open RAN system and the cloud will actually bring down the overall cost. Which is a parameter for any good technology. The overall cost will come down. I think that's the important thing. And I agree with you that Gram Panchayats, 6 lakh, whatever numbers, the towers have to be interlinked, fiberized. There has to be much more awareness creation with the government. The ROW should kind of wake think something pricing, which is the most important thing. I do not know why we still have the floor pricing. It is almost, I think 15 years since the floor pricing started. You can't operate an industry as vital as telecommunication for a country like India at a $2 situation. You just can't do that, They should have, they can have floor pricing for certain segments or something that they have to think through how to do it. But unless you remove the floor pricing, as Akhilji pointed out, the health of the industry is not going to. There's no point having 1.1 billion customers connected, but they can't even use the service properly. Then what is the fun in having? It's just it's a number which everybody shows in the presentations. So thank you so much, Mr. Balaji, for giving this really, really strong input into the whole system. May I now request Mr. Vikram, Senior Director, Industry Vertical, HP India, to please give his comments.
Thanks, Sukanta. So I think you started off by pointing out a few things, and it was further amplified by Akhilji himself. Firstly, to Akhilji's point about pride in the industry, I guess it's a point that is well received. Actually, we as HP are very proud about being the core provider to the 3 largest telco providers here. And I must thank all the telco providers here, specifically for one thing, the example that Sukanta took about college. I went through that myself for my daughter. Not just that, I think we've been banking, we've been transacting, we've been couriering, We've been doing all kinds of things. The manufacturing industry, which otherwise does most things out of a shop floor, has actually moved their design teams in-house. All of this actually has happened because of a telco like yourselves, or the telco of all of you here. Banking as another example. They've been rostering, all of us know, but banking as a function has moved home as well, and that is thanks to telcos like you. It certainly is a very, very capital-intensive industry, and is further quite nuanced by the regulations, the compliances, and of course the tax regimes and the spectrum regimes of varying kinds. Since we are providers, and we just not provide only infra, we provide the telco cloud infrastructure, the core PaaS, the edge vRAN infrastructure, as Balaji pointed out, and of course a lot of telco customer solutions, because we provide the OSS and BSS support for a whole host of service providers. What we've seen is the very unique creativity brought in by each of you, irrespective whether it is Airtel or it is we or the third provider, which is Reliance. I think the aggregating and disaggregating part that you all have brought in to most of the pieces, be it the core NFEs or the partner NFEs, so on and so forth. I guess India is one of those places where our creativity really brings things to fruition in varying ways, despite the very testing times that we face. It certainly is the most, perhaps, capital-intensive business that we are in. We do offer some respite from HPE perspective. We offer consumption-based models, as Sukanta was pointing out. Of course, that's not for taxes that we offer. It is for the telco core and all the infra that you have, plus the OSS and BSS support. I also was fortunate to hear the chairman's remarks in the where Mr. Mittal spoke about the need to be improving the ARPUs from about $2 to much more. And he said at what stage we would reach a stage of comfort and how things would get back on an even track. I certainly sense a lot of anger within the providers, because as Mr. there is never a stop moment. Getting I have a cross-industry view, and getting the time, even 2 minutes or 5 minutes out of a telco senior executive is the most difficult thing, primarily because of a variety of elements that they're kind of managing, and most importantly, the competitive element. I guess with the onset of 5G, I think there is plenty more creativity possible. vRAN is one example Balaji spoke about, but there's much more that we can do together, is how I would see.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vikram. So you touched upon the very important aspect of this business. The capex is the opex. And Mittalji's comments are, of course, the most important thing in that conference forum, which I was also able to listen to. Now we have just very little time left. We have about 9 minutes, and I would request any one of you to give any important comments you want to give on the forum. I have one thought which I ideate with this. Suppose the $2, and I would directly request Akhilji to start with this. Suppose the $2, if we have some method by we tell the government, can we make the $2 $3? Or can we make the $2 $2.50? So can the government work to a specific formula? Floor pricing. Whatever you want to do, obviously you have to look after the Janta first. Nobody's saying that. I'm also part of the Janta. But can the $2 make $2.50? Or the $2 $3? Then the whole impact and equation will completely change. And that is a starting point. I mean, it's not $3, someday will become $5, etc. Over to you, Akhilji.
Well, I think first of all, let me clarify, this is not a complaint that I have against the government, because the fact remains the best way to run an industry is to keep all the pricing to the market. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons, which I think nobody would know better than people on this forum, for many reasons, unfortunately, that pricing has been kept artificially low. Some call it predatory, exploratory, but whatever. And that is why my government that perhaps time has come for them to intervene, put a floor price, and yes, that can automatically mean that $2 or wherever can inch up toward 200 as a as phase 3. Happen. Only thing we have to keep it has to be very proud of is that we have been able to connect everybody in this country virtually, and that is something, an advantage we must not give up. So it will have to be done a little gradually, but it has to be done regularly. There has to be some increase, just like inflation. So it can definitely be done, but unfortunately, in the current construct of this industry, there seems some kind of government intervention.
Thank you, Akhilji. Any other person who wants to give their comments on this very important topic? Please go ahead, anybody.
So I think Akhil Bhai has summarized it quite well. It's not a complaint, but it's just a necessity now. And I think even there we could do multiple cuts, which is something that in a way the industry and all the players, and I mean all the 4 players, have kind of indicated that maybe voice, because that's something which is seen as essential, and some of the certain strata of the community need to have that. So maybe voice is still kept under forbearance, and so the focus can be only on data. And again, there's a formula which is possible where a certain amount of data is, made available. Rather than only have unlimited bundles, you can have 1 GB, 3 GB, 5 GB bundles available, so that people have the essential ability to buy small bundles and continue to use it. While those are using a lot of data, then obviously end up having a larger burden on their pocket, but that's quite fine because they're making those choices in consuming data in large bundles. So tiered pricing, to make it simple, focus on data, could be 2 further nuances that can be undertaken as part of this exercise. And there are many other ways that can be sliced and diced, but directionally it can be done along what Akhil Bhai said, in a phased manner. One can get to that stage if we start working on it now.
I'll just add a couple of things. One is on the market. I broadly agree with Akhilji in terms of that ultimately, globally, it's best observed where you have 3 participants and then BSNL to mutually work out what is viable for them in terms of market prices. I think generally there is a clearly increasing view that it will start going up sooner or later. So I think what we can focus on is what else we can do to reduce the cost, and I think there are 2 parts to it. One is the government investing in significant amount of capital in building the network and keeping that on a neutral network basis. And I can just share a couple of examples here. As we speak, North America, USA in particular, has already gone ahead with a 20 billion RDOF fund, which is to connect rural America. There's a current bill in proposal of $94 billion to further connect rural parts of America, because they clearly see this as a GDP enabler. So these are great examples of large funds, very, very large funds, compared to maybe while we have kicked off on BharatNet, there's a lot more to be done clearly on that. And I think that will then ultimately reduce the network costs for the telecom operators. Instead of having to build this themselves, they can then share this from the government. So I think that's one. And second is, I think what was touched on the Open RAN part in particular. So various elements of the network, whether it's core or a radio, moving towards the virtual side. I think there actually India can take a lead, while some of the other players have moved forward in terms of Japan, Korea, and the US as well. I think that's an area where we're already starting to see some Indian players, including Sterlite, starting to build these solutions. And I think I think we can really take a lead, because we also have not only the solution, but we can also do the system integration of that. So that from the operator perspective, while there is some element of calculated risk, they see these significant benefits in their costs. So I would say if these 2 elements of cost could be solved in the near term, I think that can further enable the profitability of the telecom providers.
Thank you so much. Now I would request Mr. Agarwal to give his final comments. We are a very quick one, please.
So I think overall we continue to be very excited. As I said, we're clearly in the right place at the right time in terms of supporting the country from a very patriotic perspective. We all should be very proud of the role we play in enabling the economy. I clearly see that the government will also start viewing this from the same lens, that rather than being extractive from the telecom sector, how do we enable this? And I really feel that these few elements that I touched on in terms of investments in the network, enabling new technologies such as ORAN to accelerate the cost, and then a 5 to 10x jump in fiber deployment in the country. These are few things that can really enable the quality of our network and enable also the profitability of our telecom sector, which is very important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Vikram, your final comments?
So it's firstly, I mean, it's been a wonderful, group here. I'm sure, I guess, we will come around all of these challenges some point of time. I was just drawing some parallels and thinking aloud more so. When manufacturing started off, it started off with partnerships from around the world. Not so much banking, but many of the other industries seem to have started with partnerships from around the world. So, and we're already in the second phase as far as telecom is concerned, where we're disaggregating some bits and figuring out newer ISVs, so on and so forth. Perhaps the third stage is what we do a lot more indigenously, as what we're seeing with some of the telecom service providers here. And that is going to reduce the cost as much as your disaggregation is right now today. That's how I would see it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Saurabh, your final comments before we close.
Great. I think wonderful discussion, and clearly, to echo everyone's thoughts, telecom is clearly I would say, the tip of the spear for Digital India program. It is the industry which can really make Digital India make or break in a way, because it's, as an industry, telecom not only has the power to disrupt its own sector but also multiple other sectors, especially with the advent of 5G, where telecom will be the pioneer to go ahead and do innovation, transformation, all the sectors of the country. With that thought in mind, I think a very strong support from the government as well as innovation from all the service providers and ecosystem partners will be a great win story for us.
Thank you so much. I think the time is really up, and I'd like to thank Cyber Media and Voice and Data for giving all of us this opportunity to discuss this important topic, and thank all my esteemed panel members in a discussion which I always enjoy. Remember always that this is the fastest growing business of modern times. Thank you. Bye-bye.